Now, Blackwater is a company that we contracted out to in Iraq and Afghanistan, many parts of the world, and they caused us a tremendous amount of trouble. You remember the 17 civilians that they killed in Nisour Square in Baghdad. That became a huge scandal and an investigation, but that was one of many, many things that they had done wrong, including, by the way, bilking the U.S. government. All these contracts, often no-bid contracts, there's no one in the world that can do this other than the incredibly conservative right-wing company called Blackwater. We just had to give all the contracts to them. Now, they killed so many innocent civilians in so many different areas with such little regard for civilian life that they became an embarrassment. So what was their answer to that? That's okay, we're just going to change our name. They changed it from Blackwater to Z, and then that didn't work, so then they changed it to Academia. Wow, that sounds so smart. And then they sold to another contractor, Triple Canopy, and now they have changed the name of the entire company to Constellus Holdings. You see, if you change the name 4 or 5 times, then the company becomes much better. Oh, okay, is that how it works? So now New York Times with a devastating new report about what the State Department actually knew about Blackwater and what Blackwater did back in Iraq. Now this is amazing. So State Department puts Gene Richter on the case and says, hey, look, we got all these reports about Blackwater ripping us off, unsafe conditions, let alone what they're doing to the Iraqis. But we're worried about what they're doing to us, to our troops, to our reputation, to our relationship with Iraq, and our money, right? So Gene Richter goes and starts to interview, for example, Dean Carroll, who's the project manager for Blackwater. He runs Blackwater in Iraq at that time in 2007. And here's what Daniel Carroll apparently told him, that he could kill me at that very moment and no one could or would do anything about it as we were in Iraq. Now, that is insane. A contractor is telling a government official that he theoretically works, they theoretically work for the State Department. This guy's a State Department investigator. He says, I'll kill you where you stand. And now it's not he said, she said, it's not one person versus another. Richter was told by others, man, these guys are super hostile to you. Make sure you have another person in the room. So he brought in this guy, Donald Thomas in. Donald Thomas sitting there and he's like, oh my God, did he just say he would kill him? Okay, so it is independently corroborated. So Gene Richter explains more. He said, I took Mr. Carroll's threat seriously. We were in a combat zone where things can happen quite unexpectedly, especially when issues involve potentially negative impacts on a lucrative security contract. Look, billions of dollars went into Iraq and they didn't come out. And there were endless stories of like $800 million disappearing. You think in the middle of that incredible heist, as they're robbing the American people blind, and people are dying left and right, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have died, thousands of American soldiers have died, they're going to miss one guy? People would get thrown off a bridge and then people would forget about him. So it's like in the middle of this combat zone, when it's an absolute disaster in Iraq in 2007, if this guy kills him right there, you think anybody's going to ask questions? Well, let's find out which side the government's on in a little bit, okay? But New York Times explains, American embassy officials in Baghdad sided with Blackwater rather than the State Department investigators as a dispute over the probe escalated in August 2007. That's their own investigator, right? Okay, let me give more details. The officials told the investigators that they had disrupted the embassy's relationship with the security contractor and ordered them to leave the country. So the investigator's like, hey, these guys are up to a lot of no good, including robbing us of money and yada yada. This guy crashed a $180,000 vehicle because he was drunk, and let alone the deaths and all this stuff. They're like, and then he just threatened to kill me, right? They're like, yeah, get out of here. You're disrupting our relationship with the contractor. But the contractor is robbing you. No, shush, get out of the country. Okay. Gene Richter explained, hey, look, comes back home, writes a scathing report. And that's why we find out about it now, because it had been buried. Now New York Times discovers it. They explained that it was an environment full of liability and negligence. He further warned, the management structures in place to manage and monitor our contracts in Iraq have become subservient to the contractors themselves. But there, right there, Gene Richter accidentally stumbled upon the real reason for the Iraq war in the first place. The whole mission was subservient to the contractors themselves. American people's interests, American people's money, American people's lives, Iraqi money. Who cares? The war was started for the contractors in the first place. Our vice president started the war. A vice president who got $34 million exit package as he left Halliburton. Halliburton who got millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts, billions of dollars in no-bid contracts. Their stock price went up 5 times during the Iraq War. It was started for the contractors. So, wow, it turns out that the government, when forced to pick between an honest government worker whose life was threatened and the contractor, chose the contractor because the government's totally bought off in the first place. So, two more from Gene Richter here. Blackwater contractors saw themselves as above the law. And he further explained the contractors, instead of department officials, are in command and in control. Now, 2 weeks after he wrote that is exactly when Blackwater fired into that square in Baghdad, killing 17 civilians and wounding far more. When officials went to investigate that, they found out that despite Blackwater's claims that they were just responding to terrorists, there was no evidence that anybody had fired at them, no evidence that there were any terrorists in the area. It looks like they got stuck in a traffic jam, and they were so above the law, they just threatened to kill a State Department official, and they won on that issue. Gee, I wonder why they felt they were above the law. That they thought, who cares? I'm slightly annoyed. Let's fire into the crowd and kill all these people. The State Department was warned. He told you guys they were going to do this, and they didn't listen. They kicked him out of the country. And what happened? Blackwater did exactly as he had warned. Garda Cologne, U.S. Embassy acting regional security officer, when kicking Richter and Thomas out of the country, said, they have unsustainably been disruptive to day-to-day operations and created an unnecessarily hostile environment for a number of contract personnel. They created a hostile environment by almost getting killed by them. He threatened to kill you. He seems like he's a little hostile. You see, you created a hostile environment. This war had nothing to do with the American people and what was going to benefit us. It had everything to do with what was going to benefit the contractors. Finally, when Blackwater was looked into, Condoleezza Rice, who's the Secretary of State, she's Richter's boss. Now, she's the one, not her personally, but her department that sent him there to investigate in the first place. So obviously they must have been really pissed when they saw those memos. New York Times explains, Condoleezza Rice, then the Secretary of State, named a special panel to examine the Nisour Square episode and recommended reforms. But the panel never interviewed Mr. Richter or Mr. Thomas. Furthermore, Patrick Kennedy, the State Department official who led the special panel, told reporters on October 23rd of 2007 that the panel had not found any communications from the embassy in Baghdad before the Nisour Square shooting that raised concerns about contractor conduct. I guess he didn't look very hard, did he? Oh, golly gee, I couldn't find any memo. Hey, here's a memo saying Blackwater is going to kill the guy you sent in and that they're above the law and they're going to cause a lot of damage. No, I can't see it. Can't see it. No such memos, no warnings. Gee, I wonder if Condoleezza Rice and the Bush State Department was a little corrupt. And by the way, after Nisour Square, after that international scandal, Blackwater, Academy, or whatever the hell they're calling themselves, only got $242 million more in contracts, including a $100 million CIA contract under President Obama, including their latest contract from President Obama's administration on May of 2014. No, it's okay. President Obama doesn't look backwards to where the murders were. He only looks forward. If you look forward when it comes to the bankers and the contractors, well, you won't see any of their crimes in the past, right? See no evil, hear no evil. Blackwater, you're free to go. I hope you enjoyed that war. It made you very, very rich.